Hey everyone, it's me Lyric. I'm here at Ardea Market Garden. We're going to take a tour. We'll see foods that go out as Bounty and Soul Market growing in the garden. We'll learn how these plants grow and some harvesting tips that you can use in your own garden. First we're going to take a visit with my dear friend Cucumber. So here are the cucumber flowers, and when these flowers fall off, right there is where the cucumber is going to grow. You can see here's a flower, and here is the baby cucumber starting to develop. And right below it is a fully grown cucumber. Cucumbers grow along the ground as a vine, or they grow up using tendrils and they climb. This type of cucumber grows along the ground. So when you're ready to harvest your cucumber, like this big guy right here, you can just take a knife and you can see where it's connecting to the plant. Right here where my finger is. That's the stem where it's connecting to the plant. And you just want to cut that stem. And you want to make sure you're not cutting other vines that are part of the cucumber. And now you have your fruit. I could tell this one was ready to pick because it's nice and big and the skin is firm. Different types of cucumbers grow to be different sizes at maturity. So remember to check your variety because some of them don't get this big. Next we'll check out these onions. So onions grow as a bulb underground. So this is the onion part, and then these are the greens, the leaves, which are also completely edible. And as the onion starts to get bigger, it'll start to push itself out of the ground. That's why we can see a lot of these. First, they're fully underground, and then as they mature, they push themselves out. You know you're ready to harvest your onions when the leaves begin to die back and fall flat. They'll just tip over. All of these onions are still growing strong, so they're not quite ready to harvest. But something to consider when you're growing onions is you want to give them lots of space. So 2 onions like this are really growing a little bit too close together. They'll be fine, but they won't get quite as big as, say, this onion over here that's growing by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out one of these onions and give the other one space. And when you harvest your onions, you can pull from its nice strong stem here. Just gently pull and wiggle. So then this onion now has more space. I'll kind of cover that dirt back up. And this onion, even though it's not fully mature, it's still completely edible. All of the green part is edible as well, so it's going to be really delicious in dinner tonight. We'll take a look at some peppers. So pepper plants grow as a bush, and they can get fairly big. They can get like 3 feet high. And they have lots of branches and they can spread fairly wide too. So just like the cucumbers, peppers have flowers, and then when the flowers fall off after they get pollinated, the pepper grows right from there. You can see that happening really well right here. This is a flower that's about to fall off, and then this is a young pepper starting to grow, and then this is a more mature pepper. There's so many different varieties, different types of peppers that we can grow here. They come in all different shapes and colors. I know we have some purple peppers coming in from Dr. John Wilson Community Garden for the market today, which is really exciting. So that can make harvesting peppers kind of tricky if you're not sure exactly what variety you have. Like if you came to one of our markets and got some of our mystery peppers. But all peppers are fine and safe to eat green. So they all start out green like this, but this pepper specifically, this one will get red when it's fully ripe. But I'll eat them green as well. They're really delicious. They just have a slightly different flavor. So be patient with your peppers. If they're green for a long time, you could just wait and see if they start to turn color. And if not, you could harvest some of the green ones and try those out. The same is true when harvesting your peppers as with the cucumbers. You want to see where the pepper is connecting to the plant. See the little stem that's connecting them, and then just cut that. That way you're leaving the rest of the plant intact and the other peppers are going to continue to grow. In between my peppers, I have lots of basil growing. We heard from the community that basil is your favorite herb, so we have been purchasing local basil and getting local basil donated for distribution at our markets. If you choose to grow basil, which I highly recommend, it can grow fairly large, like 1, maybe 2 feet tall. And there are 2 best ways to harvest basil. You can harvest basil by just pulling off one big leaf right where it connects with the plant, just like that. Or, and my favorite way, is to pinch off the tops. And so the tops meaning these parts that are at the top of the plant, the smaller leaves that are new and fresh at the top. And by pinching those off, so I pinched it off just like that, that is going to promote more growth to happen from that spot, which is called a node. And so that can help to encourage your plant to grow bigger and bushier. And the basil leaves you can really harvest at any time once they're big enough to eat. If it was a really tiny basil plant, I would allow it to grow a little bit bigger before you start harvesting so that it still has enough energy to grow. These are some really young carrot plants. The orange carrot part that you're familiar with grows completely underground, and so then these are the carrot tops, or the greens. And these are my more mature carrot plants. These ones, you can see the greens are nice and big. And the greens are actually totally edible as well. You can use them kind of like parsley, like pestos or as a topping. And then you can see the orange carrot growing under the soil. I just dug it out a tiny bit so you can see it. It's not quite ready yet. I usually harvest carrots when I can see a little bit right at the top of the soil and I can see how large it is. And carrots actually come in lots of different colors: purple, red, white, yellow, and different sizes too. You could have really big long carrots, or you could have some of the smaller baby carrots. And that's one of the wonderful things about growing your own food, is you can experiment and try different varieties that you wouldn't necessarily find at the store, some of the more unique fruits and vegetables. Over here we have our corn. It's really tall. I think it's at least 10 feet tall. So the parts up there are what folks call the tassels, and that's what it produces the pollen that's going to ripen the fruits. This right here is where the corn ear is maturing. So these beautiful pink purple silks are what accepts the pollen from way up there, and that is what matures the corn ear inside here. And so you can see this green part is the corn husk, if you've ever husked corn before. These will be probably a few more weeks before they're ready. And when you're ready to harvest your corn, I usually grab onto the cob and pull down, and that will break the cob off of the stalk. Here we have some kale and some radishes. This is some really beautiful purple kale. This is one of my favorite varieties. You can see it has this beautiful purple stem, and all of the veins on the leaf are purple, and it's just really lovely. And you can use it just the same way you would use curly kale or another type of kale. Greens are really wonderful because they're what's kind of known as cut and come again. So you can harvest leaves and leave some leaves and they will just continue to regrow. So like this leaf is nice and big. This is definitely ready to eat. So I can just follow down the stem. Again, where the stem is connecting to the plant is where you want to sever. And you can typically, with this type of kale, just break it off like that. You could also use a knife. And so this way I'm leaving the other leaves. You know, maybe I'll harvest another 1 or 2, but I'm always going to leave some leaves on the plant, and the leaves are what's going to continue harvesting energy from the sun, and that way the plant's just going to continue growing and producing more food. This is the curly kale that we've been seeing at market all the time. We have so much curly kale coming in from Beacon Village Farm, New Sprout Organic Farms that we purchase almost every single week. And here are my radishes. These are all of the radish tops. The greens that grow above ground, these are also, again, totally edible. And then you can see the radishes are really ready to harvest. They're just popping themselves out of the ground, and that's how you know that radishes are ready, kind of like the onions. So to harvest something like a radish, just like some other roots, you pull very gently where the root is connecting to the stem or the greens, and you can just wiggle it on out. Woohoo! Look at that radish! So beautiful. Now we'll talk about tomatoes. So tomato plants like this, as you can see, grow very, very tall. Boom. They grow more in these clusters. But so each of these tomatoes did come from an individual flower like the cucumbers or the peppers, but they grow on these branching clusters. And so they ripen typically from the back of the cluster forward. You can see we harvested the tomato that was here and ate it. And then this tomato is the next one that's ripe, and then they'll ripen on their way forward. Tomatoes are another tricky one where there's lots of different colors, lots of different varieties and sizes, but typically tomatoes will start green and they will turn some other color, yellow or purple or red or orange. But another indicator, if you're not sure what color your tomato is going to be when it's ripe, is that it's ripe when it's softening. So these green tomatoes, they're really, really hard. I can't really squeeze them. But then this reddening tomato, you know, it's not so soft that I can squeeze it without it bursting, but it does have some more give and some definitely a different texture than the green tomato. So that's a good tip for the tomatoes. And when you're ready to harvest them, I'm not going to harvest this one because we're harvesting these for our CSA tomorrow. But when you're ready to harvest, you can just, again, take a knife or your fingers and pull it from the branch. And now we have summer squash. So summer squash grows in kind of a big sprawling bush. They get really big and crazy. Winter squash actually grows on a vine that snakes along the ground, and then gourds, which are really in the squash family related to summer squash and winter squash, they tend to grow up on a vine that wants to climb. So summer squash has these big, beautiful flowers which are edible, which is really exciting. You can pluck the flowers and then stuff them with something like bruschetta. I love to stuff summer squash with bruschetta, and then saute them in oil, fry them up on the pan. You could even bread them. I've done that before. Just like the others, the squash grows out of where that flower was. And here's a little squash growing out from where that flower fell off. And then here's a bigger squash. So summer squash, you can really harvest at any size. With something really small like this, I would let that get bigger, but it's totally edible. And then this size that we'll harvest together right now, that's even like a little bit bigger than I usually let them get. I find them better when they're somewhere between this size and this big one down here, because they're just a little bit more tender. So when you harvest summer squash, you want to cut them again where their stem from the individual squash is meeting the plant. You can cut that, and now you have a free squash. So like I said, this is maybe a little bit bigger than I usually harvest, but still totally delicious, totally edible. We have so many summer squash going out at our market lately, also zucchini, which is a type of summer squash, because it is that season and these plants are so prolific. They produce so many individual squashes, and these are fairly heavy, so many pounds of food comes out of one of these plants. Bonus plant, I want to talk about strawberries. Strawberries snake along the ground with these kind of elongated stems called stolon, and this is how they spread. You'll see a leaf popping off, and if this stolon finds its way to touch the ground, to be in contact with the ground, it'll root out right there, and that'll create another strawberry plant. And the strawberries, as you can see, they grow kind of in these clusters that come out. And this is, of course, as we've learned, where the flowers were. And now there's a tiny baby strawberry in there. And when the strawberry is ready, it looks nice and plump and red, just like this. And you can just pluck it, leaving some of the stem on. And now it's ready to eat. Oh, it's so good. I hope you guys had fun on this garden tour, walking around seeing the food that we have at the Bounty and Soul markets and how it's growing in the earth, where you live. It's really, really exciting to become connected and informed and involved in local food, because you can really see what's going on. You really have the accountability and you can get hands-on with what you're eating. You can build a connection to these foods as you learn how they grow, as you learn how to harvest them, as you learn how to cook and prepare them. It's all part of the same process of nourishing ourselves, not only nutritionally and physically, but also mentally and emotionally. Spending time with plants and in the soil is proven by science, even though it did need to be proven by science, to benefit you and your emotional health, to decrease rates of depression and chronic fatigue and feelings of loneliness, because we're all connected to this earth, and it's really easy to feel that when you're in a garden space like this. So we're really fortunate to have a lot of local community gardens and farms where we have the ability to get involved and to learn together. If you want to learn more about getting involved with local food, you can sign up for my email list. I send out an email every Monday that includes not only Bounty and Soul opportunities, but opportunities with our partner gardens, ways you can get involved, educational opportunities, events, things like that. So I'll see you next time. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I would love to talk more with you, and I'll see you soon.